Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Beat the Clock podcast. My name is Michelle Rubio-Garcia, and I am here to help you grow. Through the many timed interviews I'll be having, all guests will answer 4 time-specific questions. 1, who were you? 2, who are you? 3, who will you be? And 4, how can listeners avoid clocking out? By answering these questions honestly, we hope to show you how each moment connects to the next, so that you can begin your journey to find your passion, purpose, and growth. Whether they are entrepreneurs or thought leaders, all are invited to sit down, chat with me, and show you a realistic depiction of success. By doing so, we hope to change your mind and empower you to beat the clock.
What are you waiting for?
Hello, everybody. This is Michelle, and you are in episode 9 of Beat the Clock. Thank you so much for tuning in. I do not take that decision lightly with so much content you can stream. Thank you for trusting me to give you quality content, and thank you for investing in yourself and taking some time to just really hear some inspirational words that can change your life. Good job. If you haven't already, please go to Instagram and Facebook. Like the podcast pages, they are Beat the Clock Podcast on both. There, I upload motivational content. I try to give you some money or prizes when I can, and I just try to keep you on track with some gentle reminders or thought-provoking little messages. So if that sounds good to you, please go ahead and head that way. So before I jump into introducing this week's guest, I want to do something I've never done before. So I've been trying to word some affirmations for you guys, believe it or not. And again, this podcast is all about time, so I didn't want to make them generic, and I wanted them to revolve around time management. And I finally found them. The wording is great, and I want to elaborate with you. I will say them every week so that you can have these in your arsenal when you're feeling low, and I just hope they help you cope. So, the first affirmation of this podcast is, my time is valuable. Even if you clocked out and you feel like you gave up a long time ago, or you're too far gone to reach a goal, or you're too tired and you just want to sit around for 6 hours, your time is valuable because you are valuable. Your efforts and everything that you do. So 1, your time is valuable. Believe it. 2, I can control how I use my time today. Meaning, everything you do is a choice, guys. You even being here, still listening, is a choice. And those tiny decisions, if you make enough of them, they'll change your life. So you can control it, even if you feel like you're swept up in the current of others' opinions and thoughts. Finally, I trust myself. So those kind of bleed into the last 2. If you do not trust yourself, you can't think you're valuable, and you can't gain the control back that you need. But you are. So again, the 3 affirmations for this podcast. I'm so excited. My time is valuable. I can control how I use my time today. And I trust myself. Say those things to yourself. And I swear they'll make a difference. And so with that, I want to transition and introduce this week's guest, who is also all about giving you permission to just really believe that you matter. So let me go ahead and introduce her. When former collegiate athlete and competitive skydiver Sydney Williams unexpectedly found herself on the receiving end of a type 2 diabetes diagnosis while grappling with unresolved trauma from a decades-old sexual assault, she set out on a mission: turn her pain into power. 2 hikes across Catalina Island, and 80 miles later, she founded HikingMyFeelings to help others tap into the mind-body connection and healing power of nature that helped kick her self-limiting beliefs and disease into remission. Having more than 12 years of marketing experience with Fortune 500 companies and other emerging brands, Sydney serves up her truth-juice style of storytelling to break wide open, tough conversations with practical, powerful content and experiences. Over the years, she's been featured on the South by Southwest stage, as well as the San Diego Union Tribune, Huffington Post, Psychology Today, U.S. News and World Report, and numerous other publications. Today, she is the author of Hiking My Feelings, Stepping into the Healing Power of Nature, and travels across the country, empowering others to summit their personal mountains on their way to becoming well-beings. Let's see if Sydney beats the clock.
And the clock starts now.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to Beat the Clock. We have a very interesting episode for you today. I have Sydney Williams, the founder and author of Hiking My Feelings, with me today. Hi, Sydney.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
So good. Happy Monday.
Yes, I release on Friday, but it's all good.
Happy Friday.
There you go. And it's okay. I mean, whatever works, right? So I'm super excited to have you. I'm super excited. I know you're really busy, so thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
So something that I like to tell all my guests because I run promos for every episode is that I'll like run their name, right? And then for you, I'll put founder and author. But then underneath that, I always like to come up with a phrase for some people that kind of encompass their whole story, their whole being, right? Because the titles are just labels that we create. But when you strip it down, I feel for you that you are a courageous explorer. And I don't know if
Mm.
that's accurate in your eyes, but I just feel like, for example, courage. Courage is something that means there's fear present, but you still go on despite the fear and you press forward. So I think you're extremely courageous with all the work that you do. We're going to jump into that. And you're not afraid to explore yourself. Um, you're not afraid to tackle your demons. Everything about you just screams strength to me, and it screams curiosity. Would you say that's accurate?
You nailed it, Michelle. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I really respect you. And to be honest, like your interview is the most intimidating for me so far because, you stay in your niche a little bit in the beginning. I'm in the very infancy of this thing. And what we're going to talk about is very heavy for some people. And so um, I felt like it was the most out of my comfort zone, but it's definitely one of the most impactful episodes that I think we're going to have in the beginning. And I feel like this is where it starts feeling to me like it's going beyond me, right? Like we do things because we want to, in a small way, change ourselves. But now with somebody like you, Sydney, I feel like it's really going to start scaling up into the vision that I have, which is to help people because so many people want to change their lives. And I don't even think they need a formula, honestly. I just think they need to hear a story. And then that story motivates them into action.
I agree with that 100%. And that's why I'm here. So that's perfect.
Yeah, so let's just go ahead and jump in because, yes, I'm going to give you as much time as we can. The first question on Beat the Clock is who were you? So before this day today, who were you? So you can go at length about your story, and I have questions too, so we'll see where it goes.
Perfect. Yeah. So I think who I was before today, well, first and foremost, for anybody that's listening, you have the permission to change whenever you want. You have no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. So, who I was before today, I would say, for the sake of the question, I'll treat it as today as this chapter that is hiking my feelings because it's been a wild ride over the last 2 years. But I would say I was sick, I was sad, I was tired, I was confused, I was diseased, I was insecure, I was angry, I was desperate to be seen by anybody that would be around. I just felt like a toddler screaming, pounding my hands on the ground for most of my life, actually, leading
Hmm.
up to this chapter.
And there's a lot of things in that, right? I know that, and we cleared this before, so I don't want you to feel like you're attacked. You survived type 2 diabetes. You had sexual assault in your history. And so, how would you say you handle a lot of these things?
Well, I think the reality is everybody's got stuff, right? And we talk about it when we're growing up. We're like, oh, you've got baggage, whatever. But like we do, like
Yeah.
everybody has survived something. And I always like to open up these kinds of conversations by saying, trauma is not a competition, and that the worst day of my life and the worst day of your life may be very different, but we're both still here because we survived it and we're able to talk about it. So as a blanket like disclaimer for this episode, for this conversation, for anybody that's thinking about diving into this work and unpacking their trauma in the way that we've done it and the way that we do it with our groups at Hiking My Feelings, it's just like permission granted, right? Like it's always so interesting when people are like, oh my God, you've been through so much. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm sure you have too. Like, of course, not everybody has been through exactly what I've been through, but there's so many different kinds of things that we just don't talk about. And it varies. Like, it depends on where you live. It depends on how you were brought up. It depends on your religion. It depends on all kinds of things as to like what is air quotes okay to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, like, it really is, we're so much more alike than we are different. And I will say, like, as one of the functions of our organization, last year we drove around the United States and we sold everything we owned at the end of 2018 to move into a van and then do this work and drive around the country. And we visited 42 states last year. We hosted just over 140 events. And the one thing that I found as we drove around the country is just that we are all so much more alike than we are different because of the things we've survived. Like, I am a white woman originally from Kansas who's lived all around the country. You are in Texas. We don't come from the same backgrounds. I've never lived in Laredo. I don't know what it's like, but we have a shared connection in that you've been through some stuff and I've been through some stuff. And that's a really good place to start finding common ground rather than focusing on the differences between all of us.
Agreed. And I feel like I don't know how often you watch TV. Do you watch TV often?
Here and there when I have time, but not a whole lot. But I'm hip. I'm kind of aware of what's going on.
No. I didn't mean like that. I'm just saying, like, for me, this quarantine, it's been something that's been very positive and revolutionary for me. And I don't mean to be insensitive about what's going on because, like you said, I'm hip, I know. Um, but honestly, it's made me look inward so much. And because I haven't focused on the media, because right now, if you tune in, you're going to get scared. You're going to be batshit depressed, probably. But um, I've really liked this time, honestly, because, like you're saying, if you just tune out the noise and if you tune out what everybody's feeding you, which is that we're all different, that everything sucks, that we're all divided, when you get a chance to connect with people, and even when you just connect with yourself, I think you'll come to find that all of the problems are just this humongous misunderstanding of what the human experience is like.
I would agree with that 100%.
Yeah. And I think it's really sad, which is why this project kind of birthed out of that desire, right? Like, I wanted to help people. I wanted to show people that, yes, even if you and I meet today, we can still have a great conversation. We can still find common ground. We can still both be on the same quest for personal growth. It's just going to manifest itself in different ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it looks different for everybody too. It depends on what you have access to. It depends on what you're comfortable with. Like, there's a lot of different factors that go into embarking on a journey like this. Like I mentioned, I sold everything I owned at the end of 2018. I don't necessarily recommend that plan to everybody. Like, I did that out of necessity. We had X amount of dollars left in the bank. I knew that I couldn't go back to the career that I had before I started Hiking My Feelings, which was largely corporate communications, stressful career in the marketing and PR world in
Mm-hmm.
the agency setting. And so I knew that I couldn't go back. So I like the reason we did what we did, the way we did it, was out of necessity. And I honestly, like, my mission in doing this work now is to help people prevent from having to make that kind of choice. Like, ultimately, yeah, if you want to go drive around the country in a van, go do it, and I'll tell you how to get there. But we had to do that because we didn't have any other options, the way I saw it. Like, if I wanted to be happy, healthy, a productive member of society, if I didn't want to be depressed and having panic attacks all the time, like, if I wanted to live the actual dream that I had, which I had to separate out what was my dream and what was like my parents' dream, what was
Mm,
society's dream for me. Because
that's
I
good.
lived a big life that was rooted in making other people happy and wasn't actually anything that I consciously chose.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to unpack all that stuff. And then on the other side of that is these dreams that we come up with. And I'm so glad that you started a podcast. And also, for anybody that's listening or watching, there's no reason not to find joy during the middle of a pandemic. That is the only way we're going to get through this. So if you find joy, if you find creativity, if you find inspiration, stop apologizing for being inspired when the whole world is melting down. Inspired people are what's going to save us. You know what I mean? Like, we need the music, we need the art, we need to be having these hard conversations.
Yeah, and I had a lot of time wrestling with that too. And I don't know if I mentioned it on another podcast, but I'll mention it here right now. Another episode, I'm sorry. But something that struck with me from some video I was watching was that they said it's okay to profit during the pandemic. It's just not okay to profit from the pandemic. And I thought that
Mhm.
was so telling. And again, sometimes you just need a phrase like that to, like you're saying, give yourself permission to explore. And
Yes.
something that I heard last night too, which I love that you kept mentioning the word dream. I was watching a sermon, and the pastor was saying, you know, the difference between a dream and a scheme is that a scheme is just to get you better, and you're just trying to trick everybody around you. But a dream is something that you do that's going to make other people better around you. And
Ooh,
so,
I love that. My whole body is goosebumps right now. Like that
yeah,
is
I
such
got
a
it too.
beautiful,
I swear.
it's such a beautiful distinction, and it's so true. And it's really hard right now to be like in creation mode, because like that for me, and thank you for bringing that up, and that you've also been struggling with this, because we like when we were a week into our second tour. So 2019 we drove around the country. 2020 we were a week into the 2020 Hiking My Feelings tour, which was planned to go around the US and Canada this year. Like we were expanding internationally. And
Awesome.
we were a week into it when COVID happened. And let me tell you, it almost took me all the way down. Like I basically am just so stoked that I didn't follow through any further than I did on the terrible dark thoughts that were happening, because we've experienced a lot of growth and we've had a lot of success. And I use success in air quotes right now, because like what is success when you're on a healing journey? The fact that
Yes.
you're showing up is successful. But
Right.
we've done a lot of great things in the short amount of time that we've been operating. And the reason that that is true is because we were taking people out of the devices that were in their face constantly and taking them out into nature. And then COVID happens, and now we can't hike with people, we can't gather, we can't do anything. And I was really sure that we weren't going to survive this. So the
And look
first
at
two
you.
weeks, well, yeah, in the first 2 weeks of quarantine, I was like freaking out. I was in the fetal position. I could do nothing but cry and eat everything in sight, which, as a person who's managing diabetes by her proper nutrition plan and moving her body, now
Yeah.
two of my most important health mechanisms have just been ripped out from underneath me. Like I can't afford healthy food if I'm not making money, and I can't go out and hike if I'm not able to go out and hike. So how do I manage a disease? How do I keep this organization afloat? I don't know. But when I had the idea to do the virtual campfire, when I realized that, oh my God, our entire business is based on in-person interactions, and we have like the only thing that we had that was not an in-person product, and I use products loosely here too, because like we're not selling really anything, we're just creating experiences for people.
Right.
But the only thing that we had was like an Instagram channel and like a Facebook group. Honestly, like we didn't have online programming before COVID. We didn't have anything other than like we go out into nature and we teach you how to like talk nicer to yourself and how to talk about hard things, like which is great. But to transition that has been the biggest thing. So when I was inspired and I did think of an idea, all of that started happening right around the time that George Floyd was murdered. So now it's like, I'm ready to go. I finally have a plan. This is literal life and death for me and my husband. Like, this is how we keep a roof over our head. And by roof, I mean the van. Like, like it's really important that we go do this. And also, there is a social uprising. And how appropriate is it for me to be talking about what we're talking about while the whole world is melting down around us? And then I was thinking, I was like, and some of my friends were talking with me about it. And they were like, Sydney, the work that you do is how we survive this pandemic. The work you do is how we get through a social uprising. Like, we've got to become more self-aware. We've got to become comfortable with having these difficult conversations. And the conversations that are happening in the country right now are some of the most difficult conversations we've had in this country historically, where now more people than ever are participating. Because let's be clear, none of what's going on right now is new. This has all been happening for hundreds of years in America.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But now we're home. We're not at work. We're not out socializing. We don't have our normal coping mechanisms like eating and drinking our feelings or
Entertainment,
or
like
entertainment. Like,
sports, like
yeah, we don't have anything that we're usually so good at doing instead of feeling feelings and instead of having hard conversations. So when you say it's okay to profit during, but not because of, I
mhm.
support that 110%. There is nobody on this planet right now. If you have the opportunity to keep a roof over your head, food on the table and money in the bank, and you're not doing anything to harm anyone, and in fact, you're maybe even in the case of this podcast and in the case of the work that we do, making the world a better place, it's your duty to show up. It is your duty to do this work, because that's what we have to have in order to dismantle the systems that have been keeping everybody down. We have to create new stuff, and that starts with all of us as individuals. So it's like, oh God, like we have the most beautiful opportunity to do this deep inner work and like understand where we came from, what we believe. Is it ours, or is this stuff that we've inherited from our parents or our ancestors or society? And really get clear on who we are and how we want to show up. It's like one of the most beautiful opportunities humanity has ever had, while also surrounded by so much tragedy and so much violence. Like, it's what a time to be alive. I'm really interested to see how this is covered in history books in 10, 20, 50, 100 years.
Right. And I'm really glad you talked about it at length, because yes, I do think this is going to be I don't know if a reset button, but a recalibration of society, because we have not questioned anything for a really long time. And that lack of questioning and that lack of exploration, if we're going back to the courageous explorer, like
Mm-hmm.
we need to take those journeys. And a lot of what we're dealing with is just out of a lack of coping mechanisms to have those conversations, right? We're all colliding because we haven't done the work inside. So we're just exploding externally, so to
Yeah.
speak. And
We're all out here just throwing our pain in every direction other than dealing with it. Like, oh, this hurts. I should be angry. I should say something nasty. Like, first of all, for anybody that's like slipped up and had like a not proud moment in the last month and a half, 3 months, like, first of all, give yourself a pat on the back because you survived so far. Like, it is a terrible time to be in. And also, like, you're still here, right? And I
mhm.
think the biggest disconnect that I'm seeing that's really interesting for the folks that have historically never faced real challenges in their lives, right? Like, they're upset because they can't go get their hair done, but like that's the most important and pressing thing in their world, and they can't possibly fathom why that should not be the priority right now, because historically it has been, and it's been accepted that that's the priority, and everybody's fine with that being the priority. Or if they're not, they haven't ever had the opportunity to say otherwise. So I think we're just at a really interesting point societally where this could in fact be one of the best things that's ever happened to us. Of course, the death toll is astounding and horrible, and yes, this could have been handled better globally, especially in this country, especially even just with the reopening and now the reclosing, because we're starting to see a resurgence of stuff. Like,
Right.
across the board, this could have been done better. And I think that the second that we can admit that is when we start making progress, both as individuals and as governments, as society, as a country, as a global collective of human beings who are spread out all over this spinning rock, cruising through a solar system. You know what I mean? Like this,
Yeah.
like when you think about what's happening on planet Earth, and then you think about what's not happening around the rest of space, like, it is terrible. And also, we have a big opportunity to become better humans and better stewards of this planet in these times.
I love that. So let's jump into the second question, because we're talking about this a lot and it's like the same thread over and over, and it has so much to do with who you are now. So I'm going to ask you, who are you currently? But I'm going to ask you more specifically, Sydney, how do you how do you help others turn their pain into power?
So who am I currently? I am Sydney Williams, and I am a person on this planet who wants to see people speak more kindly to themselves so they can speak kindly to others. And I say that because speaking kindly to ourselves is how we stop judging ourselves, and that's how we stop judging others. When I don't feel the need to judge myself for my past, for the things I've survived, for the things that have happened to me, for the poor choices I've made or the good choices I've made, when I stop judging myself, the need and the desire and the habitual judging of others completely disappears. So that's the hardest work I've ever done. And it's simple, but it's not easy. So for how I would hope that everybody turns their pain into power is to borderline drown yourself in compassion, because the things that make us not proud of who we are usually come from shame, and shame comes from the fear of being vulnerable, right? So like, if you are scared of talking about the things that happen to you on a daily basis, even the worst day of your life. Like, if we can't show up for ourselves, how are we supposed to show up for people in our communities? That is my big question. And that's the question I'm trying to answer by means of teaching people and demonstrating how you can heal yourself, and then that changes the world. So the metaphor that I like to use is one of a ripple effect, in that the drop in the bucket starts with us, and we have to do this work about ourselves, for ourselves, and more often than not, that work has to be done by ourselves. And I want to be specific in saying that when I say do it by yourself, that doesn't mean that you're alone, right? Like, you don't have to do any of this healing by yourself. There are communities like ours, there are therapists, there are medical professionals, there are all kinds of groups and different ways to do this work in community, which makes it a lot less scary. When I say you have to do it by yourself, I mean, there is literally nobody else who can do this for you. Like, you can go to a therapist, you can come to our talk, you can come hike with me, you can do our programs, you can journal till you're blue in the face and your hand falls off. But ultimately, it is your choice on how you heal and when you heal. And it is your responsibility to heal your own stuff. Like, I can go to a doctor or a therapist, and I can sit on a couch and they can tell me what's wrong with me, but I have to arrive at those conclusions myself. I have to feel those solutions for myself, and I have to do the work. Like, there is not a therapist in the world that can actually change what goes on inside my brain. They can make me aware of it. And once I have awareness of how I can do things better, then I can do things better. But if we don't even give ourselves the opportunity to look inside and find out what are these things that make us tick, what are the different ways that we process information that society doesn't currently allow for us to do in a safe or therapeutic or efficient way. Like, I fit myself into the mold of a corporate America marketing professional who wanted to be an executive who was climbing the corporate ladder. I did it. I did it with great success, considering where I was and how junior I was in the organizations where I worked before this chapter of my life. Like, I am proud of the work I've done. And I also realized, thanks largely in part to a diabetes diagnosis, was everything that I've ever done in my life that I thought I was proud of, especially professionally, was actually not healthy. Like, the clients that I worked with and the bragging points on my resume, I thought that they were worth bragging about. And at the end of the day, when you strip away like the work you do and what you're doing and who it's benefiting, like, ultimately, why are you doing what you're doing? How do we turn our pain into power? Evaluate your choices, because we always do have a choice. Now, I'm the theme of like everything's a choice is usually gets pretty lost and convoluted in wellness and empowerment spaces, because there isn't any accommodation for the fact that we're not all born on the same foundation from which to make choices. Like, I was born into a middle class, maybe upper middle class family in a suburb of Kansas City. The education was incredible. Like, we had some of the best schools. And I was also in a bubble. Like, they literally called it the bubble because it was so protected from everything that wasn't white and safe and okay, and like on the teetering between like middle class to being like wealthy and affluent. My family was neither of those things, but that's the area I grew up in. So I was surrounded by this. So there wasn't a lot of exposure to pain. Like, we didn't learn about other people's lived experience. The only things that I knew about people from other races until I started traveling it a lot was what I saw on TV. So like, I came to form the opinions that I made about other humans based on what was shown on shows like Cops, what's shown on the news, what's shown on talk shows. Like, it's all garbage. And these are sweeping generalizations and things that get advertisers to spend more money with the networks who are reporting them. Like, none of this actually reflects the human experience. So,
and I think they do that because, and I don't mean to interrupt, but it's not profitable, honestly, or it's not entertaining to see a normal, let's say Black person existing. Like, they live the same experiences as us,
Right. And that's the thing. And if you don't know that and all you see is Black people on Cops getting arrested, then you're like, wow, they're all criminals. That's interesting. Like, we don't get taught. And like, especially with the uprising that's happening now in this country, like, my sister was born in Tulsa. I grew up in Kansas, which neighbors Oklahoma. I didn't know about the Tulsa massacre until like a couple years ago. And I didn't really truly understand what Black Wall Street was. I didn't understand what any of that was until the last like couple 3 years. Like, I grew up in the areas where this was happening, and that history was not in our books. So like,
Yeah.
it's just, it's wild. And so the best way for us to turn our pain into power is listen to ourselves, because if we can turn inward and listen to ourselves and hear our fears and start to work through those, then when other people are responding to life circumstances in the ways that they do, we can empathize with that. Like, I have never lived a day in my life as anything other than a white woman in America, but I have tremendous amounts of empathy for people who walk a different walk than I do, because my walk has been different from the people who look like me too. Most people who look like me haven't lost 23 friends in 4 years. Like, they didn't lose that many people in that short of amount of time. Most people who look and talk like me probably haven't been sexually assaulted and then had it transform their life the way mine has been transformed. Like, we are all so different, but ultimately, like, none of what's happening out here is original or new. We're all just repeating these patterns that have been passed down generation after generation. Because if your parents haven't done the work, the first however many years, 5, 7, 12, it depends on what study you read, the first however many years of your life, you are a sponge for your surroundings. So you are I don't want to say a victim of circumstance, but in a sense you are. Like, your only information is what your parents have told you, what you see on TV, what gets left on when you're with the babysitter, the teachers who teach you, the coaches who coach you if you're doing sports as a kid. Like, we don't actually have the capability and the capacity to understand what pain is and how to turn it into power until we're like much older than when it would be really nice to learn these things, so we could just start from a great foundation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And honestly, like, I'm looking at the date today. Oh, it's exactly 3 months until I turn 30. And honestly, the most impactful years for me have been like the last year, or even just now, this quarantine. I'm serious. Like, it took me almost 3 decades to finally wake up and be like, wow, like you're saying, generational curses, I'll call them, right? Like, of
Yeah.
anger and depression and whatever. Um, like you were saying, a lot of what I did, I mean, I brought home a national title in dance at my school, and that's never been done before. I did a lot of things because I'm a teacher, right? I did a lot of things that people would say, wow, that's so impressive. But they were coming from very unhealthy places. And I love that you keep bringing that up. And I don't mean to like smile while you're talking about some grim stuff, but everything you're talking about is like everything that's in my book. And I I just feel like God and the universe keeps sending me people that just affirm that I'm making the right choices, because every step I take forward, I'm questioning, like, am I doing the right thing? Is this something that's like selfish in nature? Do I have it twisted? Am I being tone deaf? Like, there's still always this doubt present. And again, it's because for 20 some years, I've been used to that doubt. I've been comfortable in that doubt. So it tries to creep in and it tries to take over and kind of take me back to who I was. But right now, I'm someone so different, and I just have to keep working from that. It's like I have to unlearn who I was and have to practice intentionally every single day this new identity that I'm creating.
Yes. Oh gosh, I'm snapping, I'm raising the roof, like I'm pumping my fist, like that's everything right now. And that's the thing, is like, back to what, like, one of the first things I said is, you have no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. If in the next 5 minutes I say something that revolutionizes the way you perceive the world or yourself, or it puts context around an interaction you had with another human being that maybe made you confused or feel weird or whatever, like, sharing stories and talking about the things we've survived is how humans continue to make it on this planet. Like, we have figured out how to create food, we figured out how to create fire, like, we know how to make shelter and all that other stuff, but the continual evolution and survival of the human race is dependent upon storytelling, and largely around how do we prevent repeating history. And that's, as a society, like, if we look at what's happening today, this was like, we're living through the modern civil rights movement. Like, if we went through school and we learned about the civil rights movement back when it happened, and we thought that that was over. Newsflash, it ain't. So like we're going through a whole
Yeah.
nother round of that. We're going through these rounds of stuff within ourselves. Like if we can arrive at the place where A, we feel safe enough to share the story, and B, we find the language that we need to articulate what happened to us, then literally anything is possible and a new world can be created in the blink of an eye. I firmly, firmly believe that. Like the second that we can start talking about the things that have happened to us and talk about them as factual events, as much as part of the country's history, like the history of Sydney Williams is as important as the history of the world. And the same for you, and the same for everybody listening. Like your personal history, like write your own history book. Like what is the history of your life and how do we stop repeating it? Like that's why stories are so, so, so important. And speaking to the sexual assault part, and kind of a segue into that, the only reason that I'm still on this planet is because other survivors of sexual assault were brave enough to talk about what happened to them. Because I didn't tell anybody about my assault for 11 years. I walked around with that as a secret, weighing me down, influencing my choices, influencing my health, influencing everything I did, every step I took, every breath I took, everything I put in my mouth, every relationship I was in was affected and impacted by that single moment in my life. And getting help and talking about it and hearing other survivors articulate what happened to them is the only reason that I'm still on this planet. Because for the longest time, I thought that what happened to me wasn't sexual assault. Because in my mind, growing up in Kansas, and maybe it's, maybe, and I always say that, then I'm like, maybe I should stop like putting it all on Kansas. But like, there is a sense of like Midwestern hospitality and properness and what it means to be classy. Like, I don't know, like there's this very narrow standard that I felt like I had to live up to. And in the world that I was raised in, sexual assault was in an alley with a stranger who had a gun to your head and he was taking your body forcibly. And that is true, and that is very much sexual assault, but that's the picture that like the media paints. 8 out of 10 people who survived sexual violence were assaulted by somebody that they knew.
I was about to
So
say,
this idea of stranger danger, like, yeah, be aware of it, and also look around you. Like, look who's in your community, because the person that assaulted me was a colleague at work, and I did not ask for that. So like, as we start thinking about like all these little things that ladder up to turning pain into power, to setting us free, to whatever, it has to start internally with our own stories. And even if you don't, like, I'm not saying everybody has to like sell all their stuff, buy a van, then drive around the country and talk about how they were assaulted one day. Like, that's not everybody's path. You might, but you can start by having that conversation with yourself, especially when it comes to like trauma, especially when it comes to sexual assault. Like, it's so pervasive and it's so taboo, and there's no justice for perpetrators that survivors everywhere. 1 in 3 women will experience sexual violence before the end of their life. 1 in 6 men will experience sexual violence before the end of their life. Like, if we're talking about the things that we've experienced connect us, 1 in 3 people in this country is one of my brothers or is one of my sisters and as a survivor of sexual assault. 1 in 6 men is one of my brothers as a survivor of sexual assault. Like, when we start talking about this stuff, we find the common ground and we can save the world. I legit freaking believe that.
I believe it too. And again, I'm doing this too. And a lot of people are like, you've inspired me, like even just like sending the sample out because I'm doing a book launch and I'm trying to get, buzz, whatever. They're like, you've opened my eyes to how much I limit myself. And I tell them, your journey does not necessarily have to be mine. I am doing it very vocally. I'm archiving some stuff, like people can potentially twist my words in a podcast or twist my intentions, or in my book too. It's like a living, breathing testimony of my life. And I'm doing so because I just feel like you're saying everybody's so scared of being vulnerable and everybody's like living with shame. Shame is like, honestly, one of our biggest culprits that hinders success, air quotes too. And I don't know that people know how to deal with it. And if they can just see somebody step into it, because again, just a month ago, I did not think I was going to be publishing a book. I did not think I was going to be doing a podcast, because I wanted to do the podcast with people in-house and live. And when the pandemic hit, I was like, great, like I'm not going to get to do what I wanted. But then you still have to, again, strategize and reconfigure it. And for both of us, like we imagined it one way, but if the vision and the heart of the project still survives, you can find the adaptability that you need, right? You don't
Yes.
always need to have it in person, right? Like my friend Michelle, who referred me to you, she said that she's benefited immensely from your virtual fire camps and that she honestly felt like God put you in her life to heal correctly. And
Well, and that's one of these things is like, and it's it's so incredible to me how we hold the stories we tell ourselves, right? Like the language we use, how we say these things. Like I wouldn't have even, there is no way unless I came through Laredo and like I paid for advertising and somehow she found a talk and she came on a hike with me. Speaking of Michelle, like there is no way in the world that we would be able to be doing what we're doing right now if the pandemic didn't happen.
agreed, 100 and
I would,
thousand million
I would not,
percent.
I would not be connected to you. I would not be connected to Michelle. I would not be connected to these incredible humans that are somehow finding our work. Like it, I, I hate that people are suffering. I hate that there's 40 plus million people in this country that are unemployed right now. But again, like we've got to like take a minute and think about like why we're so upset about why we're upset about, like to the people that are upset that we can't go back to work and that we can't go get our hair done and we can't go sit in a restaurant. Like let's talk about our priorities as a human race, right? Like when did we get so far away from we can grow our own food, we can build our own homes, we can do all these things? Like we started making these different things convenient so we could have more time to go work for somebody else and make them filthy rich. Like how does that benefit us? Like to get a salary, yeah, that's great, but like even salaries, like because people are like, oh my gosh, how do you do it? Like you don't have a regular paycheck. I'm like, I have more stability now than I did when I was working in corporate America. And let me explain that, because when I was working in corporate America, I made $118,000 a year. Do you know what I could do with that money now? Holy shit. Like one, I haven't paid myself to do any of the work that we do with Hiking My Feelings. Like we've just been like we survive. And that's the other thing is like people are like, oh my God, like you must be filthy rich. I'm like, I live in a van. So like, let's get one thing clear. Like my expenses are my cell phone bill, my car insurance, fuel for the van, and then like business expenses, which are covered by the money we raise for the business. So like my living expenses, aside from like my personal debt and my student loans, are next to zilch. So like we don't need to have a lot. And the money that I make by selling books on Amazon covers most of our expenses. So like I can afford to live this way, but make no mistake, I've sacrificed literally every creature comfort that anybody is accustomed to. Like it's wild. So it's just like, I feel like there's such a mystery about this lifestyle and the way we live it. But ultimately, like I am the happiest I've ever been. I'm the healthiest I've ever been. And I'm the brokest I've ever been. How does that work? You know, but like when you're not working 10 hours a day for somebody else, then you have an opportunity to get really clear about what you want. And this isn't a lifestyle that everybody's cut out for. And I make no mistake about thinking that. Like not everybody's going to be suited to work for themselves and to figure it out. But we have more ways to make money than just one paycheck, right? Like, so use
Right.
Hiking My Feelings as an example for anybody that's thinking about like going out and doing your own thing, especially in this time. Like if you got laid off because your business was not prepared for a pandemic, because none of them were, and you're like, what do I do now? Let's talk about the different ways that Hiking My Feelings as an organization makes money. We sell t-shirts and hats. So like our merch stuff, that's not a lot. That's like maybe $50 every couple months. Like we don't sell a lot of merch, but we sell books, we sell programs, we take donations, we host events, we do partnerships with other brands. So they sell products and a portion of that sale goes to Hiking My Feelings as an organization. Like when you diversify the ways that you are able to make money, then you can make more of it, and or you can make it in a way that feels good to you, so you don't feel like I'm turning over approximately half of my day to somebody else.
Agreed. Yeah.
And like being unemployed it's tricky, and like we're so used to thinking like I trade time for money, but as soon as you can get out of that mindset or start to explore out of that mindset and like create what you want to create. One of my first bosses in corporate America told me, City, do what you love, do it well, the money will follow. And that
right.
has never been untrue for me. The amount of money may vary. Like if you want to go out and get rich right now with minimal effort, depending on what rich looks like for you, then go get a job that pays you well. But if you want to create a life and live a life and have time to spend with the people you love and prepare food in a way that feels good to you, shit, even grow your own. That's one of the best ways to take your power back when you're feeling powerless, is to plant a garden and feel like you can grow your own food. Because if you can provide for yourself, and this is the point I was trying to make earlier, this happens a lot. I tend to go around the block to get next door.
It's all good.
But if we are able to provide for ourselves on these very basic things, then the entire world changes. Like it's not, when I travel to other places like pre-COVID, like when we would go on a cruise and we went to Haiti and people are like, that's a third world country. And I'm like, I don't know. The people there seem pretty freaking happy. Maybe we've got it backwards. Like maybe our industrialized nation, maybe our world of conveniences, like, because ultimately, like we are slaves to the dollar, man. And it's a piece of paper that means nothing other than what we consent to agreeing it means. Like you trade time to get stacks of paper. Some people have so much paper that they go to a building with 4 walls in it and put it in a metal box to keep it safe. Like, like, isn't that weird? Like we are the only species on this planet that pays rent to live here. Birds aren't paying rent. Dogs aren't paying rent. Elephants aren't paying rent. Like we've created this world that like humans created it and we perpetuate it. We can undo this whenever we want. And it starts by telling our stories, because that's how we come to realize that we don't need all the stuff we've been conditioned to think that we do need. And as a former marketer, I can tell you most of the stuff that you've got in your house is because somebody told you that you want it. You probably don't even know that you want it yourself.
Right. And I was listening to Conan O'Brien and Russell Brand, who were, talking in a podcast episode. And Russell Brand said, this pandemic has made us wonder or question our society. Like now it is kind of weird to think that we have to go to another place to eat food. And it is kind of weird that we have to go to a grocery store or whatever. Like we thought it was so normal, but when you think of it in the grand scheme of existence, we really created some weird little experiences. So I wish I could stay on that point, but we have about 3 minutes left. So I'm going to kind of truncate or condense both the questions and combine them. So who will you be, Sydney? And how can people avoid clocking out? So both in one.
Who will I be? Yet to be determined. I know that change is the only constant in life, and I'm open to it. I know who I am. I know why I'm here. I know what I care about, and I know that my intentions are good. And I'm a very curious person, always open to learning. So I don't plan the path anymore. I'm open to what the path presents. So who I will be, I will always be Sydney Williams in whatever capacity that is. And then how do people not clock out? Start getting real about the choices you're making and what you're doing and why, because our parents have expectations for us. Society has expectations for us. Educators growing up have expectations for us. Like the best gift you can give yourself is to peel yourself down like a bloomin' onion and just ask yourself, like, here's a thing that I believe. Is this mine or is this inherited? And if it's yours, hold on to it, consciously choose it and keep it in your arsenal. But if you're feeling icky when you hear people use certain language, or you're feeling gross around certain kinds of people, or you don't like the idea of going back to your office because you really would rather work from home or do something else that benefits you and your family directly instead of just a paycheck, but something that makes the world a better place. The way that you don't burn out is to ask yourself these 2 questions. These are the guiding questions for Hiking My Feelings. 1, does this feel good? Does it feel good to you to do whatever this thing is? And 2, does this make the world a better place for everybody, not just for some of us? If the answers to those 2 questions are yes, we take that opportunity, regardless of whether or not it pays, regardless of whether or not we know how to do it. We'll figure it out because we're scrappy and we're resourceful, and anybody listening has that within them as well.
Agreed. Amen. I feel like you're taking me to church. I love everything you said today, and we have about 40 seconds. So I don't know if you want to give people your handles or websites, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, everything Hiking My Feelings is now we have it all contained in one network. So go to family.hikingmyfeelings.org. And that's where you can find all of our content, all of our community activations. That's where we're housing all of that. And then our regular website, HikingMyFeelings.org as well, for the bigger picture of what we're doing and how we're getting there.
Awesome. Well, I've loved this, Sydney. It's been a true gift. And we're clocking out here on Beat the Clock, but don't clock out in your own life. Thanks, guys.